Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at the Navy League's annual Sea Air Space Conference and Trade Show just outside Washington, D.C., the #1 gathering of U.S. Navy leaders from around the world to meet with their international counterparts to talk about strategy, technology, budgets, and more. Our coverage here is sponsored by GE Marine, Huntington Ingalls Industries, and Leonardo DRS, and we're here on the Fincantieri stand to talk to retired United States Navy Vice Admiral Rick Hunt, former commander of U.S. Naval Surface Forces, and also now the chairman of the Surface Navy Association. Sir, thanks very much for spending some time with us.
Thank you. Glad to spend time with you. This is great, and I'll give you a little bit of an update on where we are today as opposed to a year ago when we did this.
Yeah,
a lot of changes.
Yeah, a lot of changes. I mean, you and I talked at SNA, and so what I want to tell our audience is that this is actually the first time that we're seeing the Navy FFG variant of the FREM, the Italian version of the FREM, which you guys, and the FREM was a collaborative development program between Italy and France. Each of the ships, each of the nations has their own variant of sort of a common design. So tell us a little bit, sir, about how your variant has evolved into this shape and the kind of capabilities you're focusing on, given that the Navy has already put its draft requirement out for the new frigate.
I think the biggest change that we've gone through in a very open, transparent, iterative effort with the U.S. Navy has been to become compliant with U.S. Navy standards. So one of the things that I would say is very important is we've toughened the ship up. We've added several hundred tons of steel to make the hull stronger, to stiffen the bending moment a little bit, increase survivability, if you will. And we feel very good about how the ship has evolved to be fully compliant with U.S. Navy requirements, seakeeping, taking a combat hit, and working through that in a positive way.
There was a dialogue. I mean, each of the contractors have their own ideas about how the Navy should think about some of the things. The Navy can be very, very tradition-bound or prior practice-bound, and part of the challenge for each of the teams has been to sort of work with the Navy a little bit to say, hey, look, some of our overseas technologies may actually better scratch your itch than you may even think. How is that process going, of that sort of education process that, because for having been aboard the ship, and having been underway on her, it has a lot of features that are different than what the U.S. Navy has, but still, getting the Navy to look at them as positives as opposed to potential negatives because they don't fit that single form. Talk to us a little bit about how that education process is going.
So a great question, and a lot of time and effort has gone to exactly that. So I talked in the past about the goodness of FREM. There have been several very key areas that I've held on to, and we've gone back and we've had those discussions on how you balance new, innovative, but proven and demonstrated capability while still ensuring compliance and the toughness of the American design. And that's kind of what we've crosswalked and I think done a pretty credible job in there. So, I'll just outline a couple of those. At the top of my list goes, we need to make ships today and into the future sustainable. By that I mean that the planned maintenance, the repair, getting the operational availability to where we need it is something that the FREM parent design came with, and the way they do it involving condition-based maintenance into the original design. And so what we have done is the upfront design, the layout of the ship spends an awful lot of time with human factors trying to define what it takes to do maintenance as well as operations. How is that maintenance actually conducted? Condition-based maintenance is driven by monitoring all the equipment, all the moving parts, and determining where they are at any given time in their life. So how much longer until you need to do an oil change or a valve replacement, so you can get ahead of the game and not wait until failure, and yet not just do it based on a number of hours or a period of time, weeks, months, between these changes, because then you do too much maintenance. And so clearly the data that I've seen increases the operational availability by about a factor of 2 times, while decreasing the number of hours that sailors spend at sea in the maintenance of the ship. buys back sailors time, greater rest, greater opportunity to focus time on warfighting and things that they deem more important.
Well, and we certainly saw that when we were underway with the Italian Navy in terms of how available those ships are, because whether you're talking to senior leadership in the Italian Navy, they'll tell you, like, look, we have a much smaller fleet, so higher availability rates are absolutely critical, and reduced yard availabilities are also part of the design. Firefighting is another thing that you guys have highlighted in your design. There are a lot of smoke extraction systems that are built into the ship. There's the automated fire, I mean, there are multiple backups to it as well. Has your firefighting approach and model, which is zonal, every deck, each zone has all of these systems, redundant port and starboard on the ship as well, how has that gone over with the Navy in terms of their openness to that kind of approach?
So again, I would say that the overall requirement for damage control remains very similar. The exact specifications on where those zones are, how they're laid out, changes a little bit over the original FREM design, and that's part of the adjustments that we've made to be compliant. Right. And so we've matched and moved some of the positioning around a little bit, but I think we take advantage of an awful lot of those cutting edge technologies while ensuring that we still map into the more traditional way of damage control that the U.S. Navy has come to embrace and has done so with great success.
And do you feel comfortable that when is the final requirement set coming out? Ultimately, it's in the next couple of months, if I recall correctly, from Hondo Gertz.
Yeah. So let me just give you a quick rundown. You know, originally the government came out with an RFI. Coming out at that point, they took a look, and 5 competitors remained. We've been doing the conceptual design phase, right, and that runs till the end of June, with routine monthly and sometimes more often engagements with the U.S. Navy, talking about, here's part of our design, take a look at it, validate compliance, give us areas where you think we need to do additional work to get it so it meets that Navy design. There's been one critical design review already. In fact, we have our next and final critical design review next week with the Navy, and then all the artifacts, all the detailed information needs to be in by the end of June. A draft RFP has come out, a lot of comments back from all 5 of the competitors. I think we're up over 300 responses from the government right now. Those will continue. I think the Navy is being very consistent with what they've said in the requirements. Some corrections and greater amplification have occurred, again providing clarity on where they're going. And I think it sets them up good for when the final RFP comes out, and we think that'll probably be in July of this year. There won't be a lot of changes from the draft. We've cleaned some things up so that that RFP will be issued. I think it'll be a relatively quick turn for all the competitors to provide their final input into the competition. And then there'll be a little back and forth with the government on that piece, with the ultimate goal of July of 2020, down selecting to 1, winning the design, winning the first ship with options for 9 more.
And talk to us a little bit about how it's going to work, because on this competition, I mean, historically NAVSEA was the design agent, so if you go back to the DDG-51, the Burke-class destroyer, the design agent on that was the Naval Sea Systems Command, and then it was, built and produced Bath Iron Works, and then there was a leader-follower kind of thing, and Pascagoula obviously was involved, at the time Ingalls Shipbuilding, now part of Huntington Ingalls is, and there are a number of competitors. Huntington Ingalls is in this, each one of the 2 littoral combat ship makers, the Austal GD team, the Lockheed Martin Fincantieri team, which you're fenced off from on that part of it, and there's one other design. Who am I missing in terms of the other competitor in the frigate?
So you've got us times 2, right, with Lockheed and by ourselves, Austal, General Dynamics.
General Dynamics and Navantia. Those are the guys I forgot. Navantia of Spain, and a very successful partnership that they've had as well. So talk to us a little bit about how this is going to work when NAVSEA is now also considered the design agent of this program. How does that relationship work, as opposed to the prime contractor being the design agent, that the government's going to be the design agent? How does that work in this context?
Well, again, I think they will down select to 1 winner.
Right.
and that becomes a design. Now they've asked for data rights. I think for the most part, everybody is agreeable to giving at least, what the Navy is looking for in that regard. Eventually, depending on the success, I think, of the early ships, we could end up growing the program or evolving it into perhaps a greater number, perhaps even more than 2 a year. Right now it's 1 the first year and 2 forever. Originally it was 1, 2 forever. So a lot of effort to get more out there faster. And I think a lot of that will depend as we go forward, see where the government finally ends up.
And on cost, big question everybody has. The joke going into this for a couple of years was, as long as it's $999 million or, it's less than $1 billion is what we're shooting for. Now the number is sort of 1.2 billion. And there is a little bit of skepticism even by some of the competing teams about whether or not that's an achievable number at the end of the day, in part because of concern that requirements are growing for the ships as well. Do you think that 1.2 billion is an achievable number for this? Obviously the lead ship will always be more important, more expensive. How do you think that number is an achievable target number?
So remember, the 1.2 would be for the very first ship. And I think that's a pretty good target at this point to throw out there and is probably achievable. I won't commit, but I think everybody is working to ensure that they're in that ballpark or less than that. Then the real question is, what is the standard production rate when you get to ship number 4, number 5? Do you get that price point down to where you want to be? And again, the range there goes from 800 to about 950. The Navy's been talking more towards 800 recently than they did a year ago. I think that's going to be the difficult question. Everybody kind of holding those figures close to their chest, as you would expect at this point. The Navy is still calling this a best value competition, and best value, I think, is what folks are working for. We think if you keep the combat systems as specified requirements, say you are doing best value, we're in a pretty good sweet spot to execute the program on time and schedule.
One of the things, and this is the last question, folks talk about the Type 26. Obviously, the UK has had a lot of success with the ship, obviously in Australia and in Canada, so now you get kind of a robust program. And every once in a while, you hear, hey, maybe we need to flex this program. As somebody who's been involved in this program intimately for a very, very long time, how doable is that without sort of derailing the program? I'm not trying to sea lawyer for anybody here, nor make a case, nor take anything away. But what would, from your standpoint as a competitor in this, what would be the challenges of sort of expanding the program to try to accommodate another competitor in it at this point?
So remember, this was a new way to do business to reduce risk and accelerate the program. I believe that if we start allowing other people to join that competition of 5 ships, you increase the risk and you most likely extend the program as far as that first delivery. And I don't think you want that. I don't think the Navy can afford to do that with the threat that we have. I absolutely believe we've got a frigate gap right now. It takes away a unique type of ship that's important for today's national security efforts. And getting the ship out on time, on cost, with the capabilities defined by the Navy already, is exactly what we need for the Navy and for the nation, and we need to hold to that. Allowing other people to come in late, I think, slips the program. Again, for really over 14 months, we have been interacting with the Navy at the technical level at least every month. And that exchange of information puts us in a pretty good place to be able to get into the detailed design and construction, that last phase. Other people coming in without that interaction can't possibly make up that time. So if we decide we want to make them competitive, should a new entry get into this competition, I think it slides the program, and I personally worry about that now bumping up against kind of a bow wave of cost with Columbia, 3rd Virginia, the 2 carriers, the frigate, the large surface combatant behind it, it sends a message that maybe is not as strong as we want to keep it right now. Right now you've got a great program, execution proceeding, it's going well, and you're going to have a phenomenal ship. You know, this is DDG 2A capability on a ship, half the cost, half the manpower, life cycle costs go down, allows you to get the numbers up, a more dispersed footprint at sea. I don't think we want to walk away from that.
Retired United States Navy Vice Admiral Rick Hunt, former commander of surface forces, the man who does strategy at Fincantieri now and spearheading the FFGX program. Sir, thanks very much, and best of luck on the program, and best of luck as the new head of the Surface Navy Association.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.